Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Hello, can you hear? Hey, I'm back. Hey, and we're all back here on Security Weekly. We have Patrick Laverty, Doug White, Jason Wood, and looking down at his crotch is Mr. Jack Daniel.
I thought Jack fell asleep.
Still with us, Jack? His microphone's muted.
Something.
Come back to us, Jack. Come to my head. Come to my head. He's still muted. Hold on. He's turning some knobs. Takes Jack a while to get it up and running in his studio.
Not even
up and running in his studio, Jason. That's what I was.
Yeah, that's where you were going.
That's where I was going.
I come back.
Yeah,
Jack.
There he is.
What's up, Jack? How are you, Jack? Get jacked in.
It's up and in. Just the tip.
Give it a shake. Nope, can't hear you now. You okay over there? I can't hear you now, Jack. Jiggle the cable.
Turn it off and back on again.
I was just gonna say that. Oh, now he's switching microphones. Look, he's breaking out another.
He had a ball bat. I was like, okay, Jack's gonna take care of it.
Jack's gonna try to hit us.
I just saw the blur of that. I thought that's like, here comes the Louisville Slugger.
Let's talk. While Jack bludgeons his audio gear into submission, let's talk about our first story: the evolutionary waves of penetration. Hey, Jack.
Oh.
Nice to have you with us.
Smooth as butter.
Smooth as butter. Hey, Jack, you still there?
I appear to be.
Okay, good. So Jeremiah Grossman made a blog post recently that talked about the evolution of vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, which, Jack, because you work at Tenable still. Jason and I are former Tenable employees, and a lot of us, of course, have been around in the assessment and vulnerability and pen testing game for some time. Patrick is a regular penetration tester.
Just regular.
Just regular. Gets lots of fiber in his diet. So,
but I'm not a doctor.
Jeremiah says that the first wave was, you think we have vulnerabilities and want to hire an employee to find them, you're out of your mind. Then the business got over it and actually hired InfoSec people. They said the second wave was, you want us to contract with someone outside the company to come on site, you're out of your mind. And the business got over it, and we're hiring consultants and penetration testers today, I think really more than ever before, which is one of my conclusions from this. But then the third wave was, you want us to hire a third-party company, a scanning service to test our security and store vulnerabilities off-site in the cloud, you're out of your mind. And then businesses got over that and adopted a SaaS-based model. And the fourth wave is, you want us to allow anyone in the world to test our security, tell us about our vulnerabilities, and then reward them? You're out of your mind. And now businesses have gotten over it, and crowdsourced pen tests and bug bounties are a thing today. Now, what I think is interesting in Jeremiah's analysis, I think that's pretty spot on in terms of the waves. I also think he also states, he says, as we see, each new wave doesn't necessarily replace the last, it's additive. And I also think this, my own opinion on this is that it indicates the market for assessments has grown considerably, despite those kind of pundits that are poo-pooing, the assessment and pen testing process. So I thought that was an interesting read for our audience. It's a very short post. I mean, I think if you've listened to what I just said, you probably
that's pretty much
about all of it.
The whole post. I pretty
it.
much read his post verbatim. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I think that's where we're getting to. We saw that with other types of security, or other types of software, We saw companies go through these same kind of things where it was all self-contained. Nobody ever looked at it. We saw them say, well, what if we had somebody else look at it from the outside and test for problems? And they said, okay, yeah, I guess we can get around that. I said, what if we, and we get to the sort of Microsoft model of, let's just throw it out there and let, people report bugs, and when it reports in, we'll fix it.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing. So now we're saying, well, there's a whole world of people who are going to pen test us whether we want them to or not. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, the whole world is going to pen test you whether you want them to or not, or whether you pay them or not. So
the difference is you're not going to get the results unless there's evidence of a breach.
So why don't we do that? Let it crowdsource, pay people bug bounties to look at it, and we'll get many more eyes, and by hiring one consultant to come in and take a look.
I think you need to be focused on what you of your assets you put in each of these categories, right?
Yeah.
Like in the first part is like if you have employees that are doing internal pen testing, where are you focusing them? And that's going to differ per organization, right? And you have to keep them focused. I think the second thing of, well, you want to hire an outside company, well, what are you going to focus them on? And that's going to be balanced against what your current security program is. And then, the third wave of the cloud, to me, that's just kind of a no-brainer. I think the majority of organizations still today can benefit from SaaS and cloud technologies. They provide better security than likely in certain areas, maybe not 100% across the board, but in certain areas, a SaaS or cloud infrastructure provider can give you better security than you can provide on your own. And then, the fourth wave of bug bounties, you want to be really focused on that, right? And I think the mistake that a lot of companies make with bug bounties is they take something that they haven't paid attention to, they haven't applied those previous three phases right? And they go, oh, let's do a bug bounty. I don't think that's a really good idea.
I agree with that one. I mean, I think it needs to be the fourth wave.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think I hope that's not what he's meaning. I don't think it is, that he's saying, oh, we're now at the fourth wave. You don't need to worry about the first three waves. I'm like, take these in waves, and then when you put it out there for the whole world, then you're saying, okay, we think it's good. You tell us. Is there something that we didn't think of?
I think it's a due diligence kind of thing. You have to do your due diligence before you put it out for a bug bounty.
You'd be stone cold crazy to throw a beta product out there.
The bug bounty companies will tell you, oh, everyone's ready for a bug bounty, right? And they're falling into the trap that so many fall into on Shark Tank, right? When the panel asks the founder of the company, who is going to buy your product? And like, my product's for everyone. Yeah. And they're like, no. And they're off, and the sharks eat them alive. You have to know your target audience, right? And I think that there's a certain maturity model. And this could vary in aspects of your business, right? Like you may, again, like I said, focus your internal pen testers on a specific set of assets or applications. I think that the cloud-based scanners, I think web application scanning is great, a great opportunity for that. I mean, there's some awesome cloud-based web app scanners. I know because I've tested, a couple of years ago, I tested a lot of them in the lab and their effectiveness. I think that even since then, fast forward 2.5 years, they've gotten even better in integrating into your processes. That's a great place to outsource. And sure, they're all cloud-based systems. I mean, most of the products you're buying today going to be cloud-based systems.
Only way I say you do the fourth wave first is if it's an alpha. If you've just got something, you want to throw it out there and just see what happens. And it's not production ready. It's not in production. It's just something you say, hey, we're just going to throw this out and let everybody poke at it, and you tell us what's wrong. And we're not running it. Nobody's using it. It's just,
Yeah, but don't develop your app with like a traditional waterfall approach.
Well, no.
And then go, oh yeah, like we did some small security tests at the end of our development, and now we're going to put it out there for the whole world. Like, no. Yeah. If you've actually, right, Jason, if you followed a proper SDLC in developing the application from the beginning, including threat modeling, then you throw it out there for bug bounties.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about the additive. Jeremiah says this is additive and stuff like that, and I think Patrick can probably has experienced this, where you get a hold of a penetration test, for example, just to the second wave, and they haven't done the first steps of checking to see what they have going in their environment. And you get in there and you're like, oh, you guys were not ready for this at all. If you haven't done the basics leading up to a bug bounty, I mean, you're going to get slaughtered. Yep. So,
but everybody's always looking for the shortcut. I mean,
but Jack, I think this also plays into vulnerability management, right? Like, if you're hiring a company and you haven't done any internal vulnerability scanning or vulnerability management, like, Tenable is among other companies that give you the facilities to do this yourself internally.
Yeah, there are all sorts of things that need to happen, and you know that's part of the business proposition of the bug bounty companies is helping you navigate this, and they will, like an offensive security organization, you know, a consultant will be like, nope, you're not getting a red team. We're gonna do an asset inventory first because you don't even know what you've got,
Right.
You know, and to you know. Traditional vuln assessment, not even vuln management. How many times have all of us done simple vuln assessment and realized that the organization has ordered, you know, has 20, 30, 50% more devices than they thought they had. You know, we need 4,000 IPs, and when you get to 12,000 IPs, you all freak out. And like, well, you know, we should talk about what your environment looks like.
Right. And Jack, it's a great point too, because like, you know, when you run those initial scans, if the company says, well, I'm doing some level of patching, like we've got some people focused on patching, and if the first, like, you know, half hour of your scan, even if it's a small environment, and you're like 1,000 vulnerabilities, 1,000 more vulnerabilities of missing patches, and you're like, you're not really doing patch management. Like, let's start there. It's okay for a company that starts that assessment and goes, okay, I want to now help you with your patch management because you need to be able to do that, right?
I think it's telling, you know, to that point about asset discovery, that Jeremiah and Lana and RSnake, that team is just launched to the new company that's doing asset discovery and tracking. It's like, it's
wait, hold on. Are Jeremiah and RSnake working together again? If I go back
again,
to
yes,
history,
new company.
Right? Yeah, okay.
Jeremiah and his wife and RSnake, and I forget who else is involved. They have an asset discovery and management organization that they've founded, because even though it's 2018. Moving to Excel would be a step forward for a lot of organizations, you know. And he actually just commented on that how popular Excel is as a asset inventory, and you know, everybody here and most of our listeners, I'm sure, have seen that, and most of us have probably done that, particularly in smaller environments. But that's not exactly dynamic. So you know, when on the bug bounty side. Yeah, you can't just turn people loose on these things. You need to know what you're doing. You need a little guidance. If you're a huge organization and have a lot of experienced people, then maybe you can get away with rolling your own bug bounty. But you know, that's the value proposition of dealing with one of the bug bounty companies, or dealing with our friend Katie at Luda Security, who helps people navigate this to do it well, so that you're not wasting money. But you know, it comes back to doing the. I want a red team. It's like, no, you need an asset inventory, and then we're going to do some phone scanning, and then we're going to look at things before we prove that you're vulnerable. It's like, I just walked in. I get it. You know, we're not going to waste your time and money. And that's where investing in the right kind of consulting will save you money in the long run.
Mm. And I'm kind of amazed at the technology today that allows you to do that patch management, even if you're a smaller company, and have that process. And you have to buy into the process and implement it. But then, like, once you get to the point where you're like, oh, we need a solution for that. Actually, one of our sponsors, and it's a company that Ron Goulet invests in, is called Automox. And that's what we're using here at Security Weekly, right? Like, I would have never had, like, one of our friends come in and do an assessment of us until we had implemented a solution like that, to have Automox. And not only is that company going to help you inventory and assess your process, right? And your patches, assess your patches, but your process, right? Like, here's where we think moving forward operationally, we can be the most effective balance between uptime, availability, reliability, and security. So here's our balance. Help us understand how much risk there means to our balance, and maybe that means we adjust our balance. Maybe that means there's some more downtime, to apply patches more quickly. Maybe that means we switch applications to something more resilient so that we can patch more frequently. That's where a good consultant is going to help you strike that balance. I want to move into a security awareness in our next story. Ira Winkler wrote an article for Dark Reading. And it's interesting because Ira is very much been in the security training and awareness space for some time. It's basically saying, like, the fundamental flaw in security awareness programs are it tries to train everyone and train them kind of outside of the scope of their job to identify security vulnerabilities or potential security threats. And he's like, almost 100% of the time, that's a complete failure. And so what he says, and I'll quote, he says that he frequently uses the example that employees know they should not watch pornography at work. While compliance requires that this be stressed, employees know that they can be fired even without having the proper training. People know and accept the fact that there are practices they have to adhere to as part of their job responsibility as a condition of continued employment. Security managers need to utilize this fact and stop abdicating their responsibility to implement security practices into business processes. This is the core function of any person overseeing a critical responsibility. Ira's putting the security responsibility on the managers to make sure that it's in the culture, in the process, that as they do their job, there's security checks and balances and controls in their jobs. I thought that was spot on, because I think we're always, to Ira's point, we're in a losing battle if we've got 1,000 or 100,000 employees and we're going to say, look, hey, don't click on that link. Like, that message is not going to get through to anywhere close to 100% of your employees.
Yeah, but you also have to be careful, because you start pushing too much on your employees. You're assuming somebody's going to be able to do a job they've not been trained for. They're going to solve problems they've not been able to do. I agree with you about the porn thing, and there's things that just in our society and our social structure that we sort of inherently know are wrong. Okay, that's a really nice binary example. I shouldn't look at porn at work. Okay, I got it. But when you start talking about you shouldn't make a mistake, if you make a mistake, you're out. And I had this argument with somebody not too long about a totally different subject, where they started coming in, and I'm going to sound like the most insensitive person here, and I know everybody knows how sensitive I am and how empathetic I am. But we were told that they wanted to train us in spotting psychological problems and potential issues with students. And I said, I do not want that. Don't put that on me. I do not want to be told I am responsible for identifying that suicidal student, because I'll fail at it. Like, that wasn't part of the job when I signed up. And I think you're going to get some pushback for employees when you start telling them, okay, you don't have any training, you don't have any experience, and you don't think like all of us do. You're an accountant. And now I'm going to tell you, oh yeah, you're going to get fired from your job if you make a mistake with some hacker who's a professional who's been working at this, and they've got expertise in how to manipulate you. And if Kevin Mitnick can talk his way into the building, you're out. And I used to try to tell companies, don't fire people when they fail a physical pen test. When somebody gets past a guard, don't fire that guard. Train them better. Teach them to do a better job. So I think you have to be careful about overstepping this, because companies love that binary solution. They love you, like what you said. They want people to say, if you don't do this right, you're fired.
Yeah, Ira's not talking about blaming the employee. They're talking about not blaming the manager, but not necessarily firing the manager.
Well, that's fine
when that happens, right? What Ira's saying is that the managers need to be responsible for building the culture, building the process, and including security in there. So, in other words, in my daily process, there's checks and balances to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. I mean, that doesn't. Nothing's saying that 100%.
No, I agree.
Happens, right?
Yeah,
but I think what Ira's saying is, and again, Ira can certainly is more than welcome on the show. He's been on our shows in the past. I like him as a person in his industry, certainly, and I respect his opinion. And what I think he's saying is that if you have security in mind when you build your processes, that naturally it's resilient to attacks, right? And I think what your university might be saying is, if we can build into some of the culture of teaching, that we're able to spot a student that might be in trouble, and whether it's suicide or any other kind of issue. And I completely agree. Right?
My point was, we have to be careful, though, that we don't, and we were talking about this earlier in the other segments, you have to be careful that you don't pitch this as a one-stop solution to everything. And I just reviewed one of these things, just these training things. Sure. And they hand you this as an employee, and they say, here, learn the 7 key points in a phishing attack. And you click the button,
and
say,
like a horrible training and
awareness.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's awful.
And that's where the problem starts, because then you are saying, here's this. We did it. You took the training once a year, and you're done. You're good. You're good to go. And that isn't going to help. And I do so many of these things now. I do one for security clearance. I do one for sexual harassment. I do one for student empathy, or whatever they call it. and now we're going to have to do one for fishing, and all these pieces, and every one of them is the same thing. It's just, you know, Bob and Sarah are in the break room.
Yeah. But no, Ira's putting on Bob and Sarah's manager. So he tells a story in this article, and he says, you know, he's used social engineering tactics to have a guard issue him a badge and give him sensitive access. He received a call from the facilities manager asking for the name of the guard. Like basically at a successful, and Patrick, you guys do social engineering, right? In your job. So the manager of the facilities was in contact with Ira, and he's like, I want to know which guard gave you the access. And Ira's like, he informed the security manager that the fact that he didn't know which guard issued him the badge was worse than the guard issuing him the badge, putting it right back on the manager. He also informed him that it was his fault, that there was no documented process for issuing badges, and since he couldn't point to a documented action that the guard didn't follow, that it was the manager's fault that the badge was issued. And I thought that was again, it's not 100%.
It has to go
I think
back.
it's a good way of thinking about the problem.
I completely agree.
Right?
I don't think the article's wrong. I'm just trying to make sure we make the point correctly. It goes back to what I call the dumb guard scenario. You really, if you're gate guard, no offense, gate guard people, you really want the dumbest person imaginable. and you well, I mean, think about it.
No offense.
Well, I'm not saying.
I like how he used social engineering to say no offense.
Right.
But
No
I mean,
offense.
but I'm not saying we have those people, and I'm not saying that the gate guard is dumb.
email Doug@security.com.
I hate you all.
Here comes the gate guard
But
union.
listen, the dumb gate guard scenario is simple. Paint a yellow line on the floor,
Yep.
and you say anybody who approaches that yellow line and they don't have a green badge and they're holding it out like this, you shoot them in the face. And if you've got the dumbest guard imaginable, I'll call it a robot, whatever you want to do, the robot goes, problem solved. You won't have a security problem because anybody who doesn't follow the rules gets shot in the face. And then you have another robot to drag the corpses off the side and toss them in a leaf shredder. Problem solved. It's a very simple solution. I mean,
Doug, you need to write a script for the movies.
So the TSA model.
The TSA.
the TSA model. Yeah, but well, something like that.
Except those rules change on a daily basis. And
Exactly.
they're different for every single airport.
This toothpaste tube doesn't squeeze properly. I'll have to confiscate it. But that knife is okay. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, the point is that you have to have good procedure. And that's what I mean by the dumb guard, not that the guard itself is actually dumb. It has to be a good procedure that someone can follow very succinctly, or they get manipulated. Because the minute they start having to think,
there has to have balance, right?
Absolutely.
You can't be shooting people in the face, right? There has to be some kind of balance.
And because you don't have the simple solution of the yellow line on the floor, you have a much more complex environment. You have to have good processes, though, so when someone gets a call, or they get an email, or they get a request, they know what to do. And that's where the manager comes in, and they say, we've trained our people, and we say, when the phone rings, and they say, give us the combination of the safe, you know what to do about that. You know, I don't give that out. I mean, I got tons of training for security clearance at Government Lab, and it was always, here's, and they did it over and over again until you felt like a moron, which, okay. Not that I was a dumb guard, but hey, I mean, when I got back, but I knew when I answered the phone that I was supposed to say one thing. I was supposed to say, please contact media services at 401, you know, and you did that a lot, and they made you do it until you did it. And
But does Ira also talk about how this kind of thing really has to start at the top?
yes,
It has to start at the top, and there also has to be common sense in it as well, right? Like this culture, I think culture has to start at the top, and that culture should also help breed common sense. You have to balance automation and common sense. And we're talking about physical security, right? And some of the physical assessments I've done, they've had this great electronic system that can sense when you're trying to tailgate, right? You're trying to walk behind someone who's gone into going up to the elevators. There are these gates. I don't know if you've seen this in your physical assessments, Patrick, but right, the person badges in front of me. It can sense if I'm behind them and haven't badged in. It sets off an alarm. That's a great I think of that as like security orchestration and automation response. Like that's a great way to alleviate some of the assessment and responsibilities of the guard,
right?
Which I'm not going to deem as dumb. The guard has help in technology. Now it's not the 100%, right? Because common sense comes into play when I can walk around the guard desk and there's a conference room behind the guard that has an Ethernet port, that there's no cameras or any other kind of security, and I can go plug in. And this is based on a real life pen test that I did way back in the day. And so I'm like, we have good that you had a guard. Good that you had some automation to help the guard apply your security rules. Bad that you didn't have that all-encompassing solution to realize some of your weaknesses as well.
And that's also great that you have those kind of controls, but we also need to make sure that our guard is checking on them. Because I know there was one where I tailgated right in, alarms went off.
And the guard did nothing.
Nothing.
Yes.
Because the guard's busy doing other things, answering the phone, checking in other people.
And the dumb guard doesn't imply anything about the person. It means that it's the behavior. So the dumb guard means they have a procedure to follow, and they follow it, and they don't start thinking about it, and they don't get talked out of their desk, and they say, I'm sorry, you don't get in without a badge, no matter what you do. The person doesn't have to be stupid, and that wasn't my, I don't want to imply that about anybody. I'm just saying that's the way they need to behave, and we got that same training for top secret, because that's loose lips sink ship. That was a whole culture of, you know, I would make some joke, and not that I ever make jokes, and I'd say, you know, we don't get paid enough here. I'm going to sell this to the Russians, and the next thing I know, my secretary's already called in the Secret Service and said, this guy said he's going to sell something to the Russians. Well, today that would be a plus, but at that time it was an enemy.
Yeah.
Today they'd be like, yay!
Yeah, I had that same kind
Like,
of...
what do you mean you're going to sell it? You just share it. Like, hold on.
I actually said I wouldn't sell it to the Russians.
Then it was a problem. Now today that would be a problem.
Slip of the lip. Yeah.
Yeah, some don't have a sense of humor.
Yeah, they don't. I found that out. That was one of my first life lessons. When I learned the Secret Service has no sense of humor.
Oh, and now speaking of social engineering, we've heard of the SIM card hijacking attacks, and the particular provider in this case was T-Mobile. And I don't know what providers everyone's using today, but I know at least with my provider, there's an extra PIN now. And say what you will about PIN number security, it does provide an extra level of protection.
Every factor you add.
Right? Every factor you add prevents the attacker
Even
from
if it's
basically
wimpy, it's another
hijacking the SIM. It's also, I think, a case to have better two-factor authentication that's not tied to your SIM. So here's what happens. The attacker social engineer the cellular provider to switch your SIM card to your number to a new SIM card. So all of a sudden, in this story, I thought was pretty well written, actually. It says, you know, she was at home. All of a sudden, her phone stops working. She can't text. She turns it off, turns it on again, goes to her husband. Husband calls the phone. It rings, but not on her phone because someone has had her number assigned to a different SIM card. Why would someone go through all that trouble is certainly my question, right? Like your average attacker, your average person, like why would the attacker go through this? I mean, attackers like automated attacks, right? They don't necessarily target a particular person and social engineer the cellular provider. When I'm reading this article, I'm like, what did this person have to like demand that level of attention and effort from the attacker?
They owned at Rainbow.
Yeah. So
they have an Instagram account.
Yeah, they're asking Rachel Adam to give up her @Rainbow Twitter account. In the buzzing underground market for stolen social media and gaming handles, a short, unique username can go between $500 and $5,000. There's your economic incentive. According to people involved in the trading, reviewing listings of popular marketplace, several hackers involved in the market claim that the Instagram account of @T, for example, recently sold for around $40,000 in the equivalent Bitcoin. So now we've got people who are like, oh, why am I being targeted? Well, you're only targeted because you have a something that is of value on the underground. In this case, it's a social media account.
And you may not even know that.
A Twitter account, and you may not realize that.
Yeah, because you just happen to own @Cornholio or something, and everybody, and you're thinking that's worthless to me, but
right. So I thought that the attack wasn't necessarily novel or interesting.
No.
But the reason why these folks were being attacked is interesting, which is why I think we need to really promote usage of things like proper two-factor authentication. That's a token, it's a Google Authenticator app, that your passwords are unique and being stored in LastPass. I think you may poke fun at some of the inconvenience or maybe distrust you have with storing your password stored in the cloud, but it helps with these style attacks.
And you also need, we were talking earlier in one of the other segments about asset management, asset assessment. You as a person need to take a little bit of time and think about because we think very heavily about our physical assets. So if you've got a coffee can full of gold in your house, you go, that's valuable. I probably shouldn't leave it on the front porch with a sign on it. But you have all these things in the world that everyone can see, even if they don't really know who you are. and they may well be valuable. So like the person who owned sex.com.
I was going to say you own a domain that could fetch a lot of money.
But I mean, I never stopped kicking myself because back in 97 or 96, I could have licensed.
No, don't tell me. Did you have a domain that would be worth millions?
I didn't. I just wish I had. I could have, you know, I was like, I could have licensed all kinds. Just pick any dirty word you can think of right now. I could have licensed it, and I would have owned it, and
not
it would
even
be worth
dirty
money.
word. Any short
Pepsi
domain. Well,
that was a tough one. Yeah, trademark names are difficult.
Trademark names, you could, speaking from experience, you could run into trouble with a trademark name.
But I mean, you could have licensed sex.com.
To be honest with you, a lot of those cases went in favor of the person that owned Pepsi.com before Pepsi did it. So case law has actually proven that, you can command whatever price
you want. You may have things, because especially as new things come along, and you jump into Instagram on day 2, and you say, I created @Rainbow, and all of a sudden, a year later, that becomes something valuable, or even something that evolves into being valuable, because if you owned, you know, @Rainbow or whatever, and it's not worth anything today, but next month there's a new company starts called Rainbow, and suddenly it's very valuable, and somebody knows I can sell that for $500,000 to the Rainbow company. Wow, you might want to keep an eye on that.
OPSEC is huge for more. You know, we used to think of OPSEC as I work for the government, maybe I work for an agency, my OPSEC has to be strong, or, you know, I'm a fund manager for hundreds of millions or $1 billion. Sure, my OPSEC's got to be good, right? Now we're seeing, like, your OPSEC has to be good if you've got an Instagram account.
You're a 13-year-old girl who set up at Unicorn.
Yeah.
Like, oops, now you're a giant target.
Like, dude, your OPSEC has to be on point. And I don't think you have to do anything extravagant, right? Like, you don't have to go hire Michael Bazell to help secure your own personal OPSEC, right? Like, I think it really comes down to having a really strong two-factor authentication, using a password manager, applying two-factor to that. Like, I really think that covers you.
Awareness.
And then beyond that, right, we talk about situational awareness and
I was just going through all this with a local friend of mine recently, where he contacted me and said for some reason he, you know, might have irritated some certain people that he's concerned about. So I was starting.
It wasn't me, I swear.
So I started going through some of the things with him that he should be concerned with, and said, like, you know, I'm more than happy to look at whatever you got. He's like, well, obviously first I need to do an inventory of everything I have. And he said the first thing he's probably going to do is, like, get rid of his domain and let his parent company handle all that kind of thing. He's like, the only thing that I'm really still left with is my social media and my email. So like you guys were saying, it's like, well, if that's all you really have, then make sure you have the strong passwords and make sure you have the non-phone two-factor authentication.
Right.
Have some kind of other device on that. But then the other thing that I was asking him about is, you know, you're worried about the content of your email. And I don't know exactly why he's overly concerned about the social media kind of stuff, but you're concerned about what's in your email, because maybe there's kind of strategy kind of things in there. But I've been to his office, and his office just kind of has a lock that you could kind of bump into a little bit easily. And it's like, are you also concerned about from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. that somebody could very easily just kind of pick that lock or bump their way in? That's probably the direction that I would go if I knew that all this kind of stuff was also stored in a file cabinet, knowing that you're going to have these kinds of extra protections in place. And it's not hard to figure out that, you know, you have something more than just a weak password on your Gmail account.
Yeah. It's interesting to help you know, folks with that, and I've helped, you know, people over the years, and it gets a little uncomfortable because you're like, all right, like, dude, like, it's just me and you, like, spill your guts, dude. Like,
what you got?
Who is she? Right? Like what's the motivating factor? Like, does she have a new boyfriend or husband or whatever? Like, you know, like it gets into stuff like that when we get into these personal cases. Certainly, I think even segueing off of our story into those cases, I find it frightening that law enforcement's not a lot of help in those cases. Yeah, it's interesting.
Another situation I saw recently, a friend was at the beach, had his phone stolen. And like 2 hours later, after realizing the phone was stolen, he gets a phone call from the person that stole the phone wanting money for the phone. And
like at his like home number?
Yeah, like his wife's number, I think, which is probably in it. And he said, like, his wife just went off on this person, scaring them to the point where they said, I'm just going to leave this at the AT&T store. You can come get it.
reverse social engineering.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, we've made a way to make that phone detonate remotely, so I
Right.
hope you enjoyed your right hand. Here you go,
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
And I was like,
And the dude's just sitting back like, dude, you pissed off my wife. Like, good luck with that.
right, good luck to you. I'm like, you going to file charges or anything like that? He's like, well, we got pictures of the person, but the police didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's like, are you
It's sad.
kidding?
Yeah. It's,
I don't think I'll defend the law
Oh, you've
enforcement.
been in a lot of cases,
I'll
Doug.
defend the law enforcement side of this. Look, these cases are small. Law enforcement does want to help. I mean, I've never once ever been anywhere, and I've dealt with a lot of law enforcement. I've never once seen a police agency ever sit there and go, I don't want to help my citizens. They really don't. The problem is person hours and prioritization.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, we can help this person who lost their phone, and I could put 2 detectives on it, and they may have one chance in 1,000 of figuring out what happened and getting the phone back because it's, you know, it's a missing phone. Or I can prosecute this child rapist. You know, I wish we had 10 times the resources we have, and I could put 5 detectives on every call that comes in, but I don't have that. Our budget's cut every week, and on and on. And
but from an OPSEC perspective, that phone's still online. If you're not remotely wiping that device, it's not good OPSEC.
Right.
That takes it off the table. Then it's just a hunk of electronics.
Yeah.
Sure, go sell it. I got insurance. You can actually get insurance for a stolen phone. Sure, you still got to pay $100 or $200, or less, you know, somewhere between $50 and $200 to get a new phone, which is a fraction of the cost of a brand new phone.
When you get good law enforcement training, so if your local law enforcement people, if they're trained well, they got a computer crimes unit, and they call, they can tell you how to do that and say, just right there on the phone and say, look, we'll probably not be able to get your phone back, but if you do these 3 things, do it, and it's going to brick the phone.
You're going to spend way more than $200. Let's take the top cost, $200. You're going to spend way more than $200 of your time, police officers' time, your friend's time.
$20,000.
Dude, lost your phone, remote wipe it, go get a new one.
Brick
I mean,
it, go get a new
I've
phone,
lost my phones. You know, fortunately, I've never gotten a phone call from someone that found my phone. I've been able to remote wipe them, and I go out and get a new phone. I don't like it when I lose my phones. Nobody does, but I mean, you're lying if you said you've never. I mean, maybe you have never lost a phone. There's a huge percentage of people listening to the show right now, like, yeah, I've lost a phone. Like,
it's like losing your wallet. It sucks,
happens,
but move
dude. It
on.
happens,
Or worse,
right?
yeah.
I mean, you lose your wallet, you lose your purse, you lose your car keys, you lose all these things, and you just have to work around it and move on. And so that's
now. Fortunately, most of the other than times I have actually physically lost my phone. The other times I've lost shit like my wallet or my phone is because I just misplaced them, and I do eventually find them. But I did lose an iPhone, and I did lose one of my Nexus 7 devices. And I'm like, remote wipe.
Yep.
Well, here's what I'm going to tell everybody. It's what I tell clients. Have a plan.
Yeah.
Just like you have a plan, or I hope you have a plan. What is your plan when you lose your car keys? If you got small children or whatever, if it's just you, like I always tell, I was just traveling in Europe with my daughter, who's now a grown-up, but when she was little, I was traveling with her in Europe and places, and I found this very stressful feeling because I had always traveled by myself. You know, and when it's just me, I don't care. I mean, I'm like, the worst thing that happened to me, I get, you know, like my throat cut. Okay, well, it sucks, but life goes on. Well, actually, it doesn't, but... You know, but, I mean, you know, you move on. But when you got this other person you're responsible for, so then you start thinking, I need to have a plan. What if I lose my wallet? What if you lose your wallet today at work and you've lost credit cards, driver's license, all these things? Okay, money, who cares? It's just cash. You can get more. But, you know, when you lose these things, you need to have a plan to deal with it. So you really need to have a plan for this quintessential portion of your life. What are you going to do when you lose this? So start thinking about that. This is an expensive device. You treat it like it's not, but it is. It's got your whole life in it, and it could cause you a great deal of harm if someone steals it. So you need to have some kind of plan ready in place. That's your quick action OPSEC plan for when you lose your phone. And that ought to be everybody from your 12-year-old kid all the way up to, you know, whomever, because you need to be ready. And so what do you do?
Passcode, fingerprint reader, two-factor authentication is key, because even if they do get into the device, when you do try and log in from Facebook or whatever, first of all, it's going to send me a notification of where you are. Second of all, two-factor authentication has been enabled, and you can name my two-factor token, which is why I like the two-factor that separates it from your phone. Right. It's even which is why, I mean, they're not a sponsor, but I like the YubiKey.
Yep.
And especially with the Google Pixel that I have, the Pixel 2, the YubiKey can actually go right into the USB-C port. that's the one I use on my phone. So that it's a physical token that's separate. And hopefully you didn't like lose your pants that have your two-factor token and your phone in them, right? Usually those are, it's a case for keeping them separate.
And
then
when
you're minimizing your damages.
And so this is the red card. So we always call this the red card. That when I used to design these kind of OPSEC things for people, it was the red card. So the red card needs to tell you, and this is back to the dumb guard, and I know nobody likes that name, but that's what I call it. This is back to the simple, something you follow, you don't have to think. There was an old thing on airplane systems. If you get an unusual attitude and you're pointed at the ground, the system literally starts saying, don't think, pull up. Because they don't want you to start going, what should I do? You use the red card, says, when do I brick? Don't brick too soon. Because, oh, yeah, the phone was actually in my other pants.
The phone was in the couch.
But when do you brick? What steps do you take? And you just really need to stop while you don't have any stress, while you're sitting around in your living room and think, what does my red card say about my extremely valuable, in many ways?
It depends on how valuable your information is. Like in Enemy of the State, when Gene Hackman had to pull the string, red card is the whole building blows up.
Hell yeah. And I mean, and that's the same thing with this. It's like, when do you brick it? I mean, maybe you do have state secrets involved in this, and you say, the minute I don't know where that is for more than 5 minutes, I brick the damn thing, and I set it to detonate in 5 minutes. But on most people, it's like, well, I'm going to, give it 30 minutes or an hour and make sure I didn't lose it. Or I'm going to do this. I'm going to find my iPhone, and I'm going to see if it's showing it's still in my house. Maybe I don't need to brick it. Oh, no, it's showing it's on a train moving toward New Jersey. Maybe you should brick the phone right now. And how do I do that? What are the steps they take? What is the site I need to go to?
I like the thieves that steal technology solely for the purpose of just wiping them and reselling them.
Yeah.
Because
your stuff's gone.
They do it for me, like whatever. It never comes back online. If it does, it's going to be remote wiped, which is how most of the remote wiping features work. And if you're just selling it for the device, like, hey, it's my fault for losing it. We're going to get a new device. No harm, no foul. Scary when you get a phone call after you lose device, though.
Get insurance.
That's a wake-up call for, I think, a lot of people.
You can get insurance for it.
Now, does iOS have native software to brick it?
Yep, it sure does.
Yeah, I think both Android and iOS have a facility for remote
wiping. I put a third-party app
Even
on
better.
there.
You can do that too.
Where I can just text it with all different commands. Like one of the even thinks it can set off an alarm, which would be
awesome. That's my thing. Well, yeah, if you can make the phone do something obnoxious, like it starts saying, I'm stolen, I'm stolen, I'm stolen, I'm stolen, I'm stolen, and there's no way to stop it. It's like, that'd be pretty fun.
I can take pictures of whoever's on it and that kind of thing.
Yeah, flip the camera on and you can see where it is. Yeah. It's just
so there was an interesting thing that happened. I don't know, those of you that have kids, Roblox.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
I know my kids play Roblox. My two older sons play Roblox. Kind of on and off. I think Fortnite has been pretty popular. Certainly Minecraft as well. Roblox is thrown in the mix.
Now, what is Roblox?
It's kind of like a Minecraft or Fortnite style.
It's like a non-violent World of Warcraft where you can play. It's an MMO.
And interact with other people.
Yeah, there's all kinds of live users from all over the world on it. You can build things. You can. Yeah, it's for kids primarily.
It's like Minecraft.
Yeah, it's just a different.
So what's the worst thing that you think you could do on there?
Well, so apparently my question is how, but apparently the incident involved one bad actor that was able to subvert the protective systems and exploit one instance of the game running on a single server. They have zero tolerance for this behavior, which was essentially like a gang rape. Like all their characters came in and raped the character in the game, which the
like Legos bumping together.
The age group for this game is probably 5 to 13 years old. Would you say, Doug?
And the one that it happened to was a 6-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And as it was happening, she said, "Mommy, there's something weird going on." Fortunately, her mother realized it quickly, took it away.
Right.
So the girl didn't see much of this.
But what's interesting is it's all through the article, like you need to monitor your children, blah, blah, blah. But, Roblox is a game like Minecraft that's targeted towards kids. And you're like, well, if they're playing video games, like they're not on YouTube or the web potentially getting into trouble. Maybe you have filtering, maybe you don't. You realize that, like with my kids, they're hackers. They've been to hacker conferences. They could probably subvert whatever filtering I put in place. So you work with them and educate them, and it's about training and awareness we talked about earlier. Also, I think, like, my number one piece of advice when parents ask me, how do I prevent my children from getting into trouble on the internet? I'm like, you put your PC in a public area, right? You put it in the middle of the family room when they use it, everyone is sitting there watching what they're doing. I mean, it's like self-policing at that point. Jason, is that your strategy too with your kids? Like you put the PCs in plain view of the whole family, right?
Yeah, exactly. We had an area in our house. It's right off the family room and the dining area, and there it was. And anytime the kids were doing something or other, I could walk over and take a look, and it wasn't any kind of an issue. So, yeah, you get into things like that where no, can I take the laptop back to my room? No, that sort of thing.
Right.
Becomes more difficult though when you got a 17, 18-year-old, but
yeah,
don't remind me.
That's where I'm at.
If I had it to do over again, I just wouldn't have kids.
It's a little late once that one happens, though, Jack.
That's it.
Yeah, I know. Regrets. I've had a few. Well, 2 of them.
Oh,
Wow.
I'm glad to know I'm no longer the least sensitive member of the staff. So.
Poor Nathan. Come on now, Jack. You love your kids.
Hey, one of them's a keeper, really.
Now you sound like Bert Kreischer when he talks about his kids, the comedian. It's pretty funny. His stand-up is on Showtime is just so he talks about security in that. Speaking of kids and security, and so if you watch a Showtime special, I don't want to give away all of it, but I thought his story was freaking hilarious because it seems to me like he's got one kid and she's she's one of his children and goes about life not so much like a hacker. His younger daughter, I'm like, he doesn't say it in the thing, but as he describes her, I'm like, dude, she's a hacker. And so she here's this safety awareness thing at school, and it's like you need to come with a safe word. So basically, whoever picks you up from school has the safe word as an extra safeguard. And she's like all on board with this strategy, which makes me think like his daughter has a future in information security, like totally. And so she's like, Dad, what should our safe word be? And Bert's like, well, like maybe the name of our dog. She's like, Dad, that's a horrible idea. He's like, well, what about the name of the street we live on? She's like, Dad, people can use Google. Like, do better than that. So she's like, what about motherfucker? And he's like, yeah, motherfucker. Let's use motherfucker. And then he proceeds to tell him how, like, the uncle or the family friend or whatever goes and picks him up from school, and she's like, what's the safe word? And he's like, it's that word, it's a bad word we're not supposed to say. And she's like, I'm not getting in the car until you say the safe word. So he's like, motherfucker. She's like, I didn't hear you. And all her teachers are standing behind her. And he's like, motherfucker. And she's like, all right, now I'll get in the car. And all the teachers turn around. And I'm like, she has a future in information security right there. Sign her up.
She'll be in Vegas in a couple years.
She's awesome. I'm a fan.
Up on stage.
I wish I'd had that safe word, yeah.
Right? I think the safe word's a good idea.
No, no, we had it, but it wasn't that. I wish I'd had that word.
That word, right?
No, my word was really boring. So
because to her point, which is why one of the reasons why she has a future in InfoSec was, well, someone's trying to lure me into the car. They're not going to use expletives. Because then she'll know something's wrong.
It's a great idea.
I thought it was brilliant. I'm like, your child is brilliant.
No one would say that to a child. Yeah, I mean, and a child molester would never want to be, single
like offending the
child. The teachers are going, wow, that man just said motherfucker to this little
get
girl.
Him out of here.
Jesus, call the cops.
Right.
Exactly. I'm like, that's a really brilliant idea.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
We're pretty liberal with our language at home too. Like mommy and daddy can say certain things that,
Yeah, my daughter said, get out of the way, you fucking old bag, when somebody pulled out in front of her grandmother once. And my mother was like, what? And my daughter said, that's what you say when somebody pulls out in front of you.
That's what Daddy told me to say.
It's the safe word, Mom.
You started telling the story. I thought you were going to say she said that to you when you're in front of the fridge or something.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Right. You were in France, so, Well, I guess a lot of people speak English in France too. But what was your experience? No, you didn't go to Hack Paris, right? You were in Paris, but you didn't.
I didn't go to Hack Paris. Yeah, it was just I had to go do a presentation.
You were an academic
I did a presentation about developing cybersecurity curriculum at IAC and University in Nancy, France, and took my daughter with me. Yeah, there's a blog post on pattyj.com I wrote about traveling in Paris.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's not a tech thing even for once.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Jason, excuse me, you had some stories.
I saw some that were kind of funny, I guess. One that I chuckled over was the hackers automating the laundering of money via Clash of Clans.
That's awesome.
What was interesting about this was the bad guys they steal credit cards, and then to turn that into cash that doesn't disappear on them or whatnot, they go out and use those cards to buy gold on a game like Clash of Clans, right? And then they turn around and resell that gold on a third-party market to players to pick it up, and that makes the cash legitimate. At this point, wouldn't be reversed by a credit card company on them.
That's
or
a great money laundering scheme.
It is. It's better than any other money laundering scheme.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I've run into playing MMORPGs and stuff like that. There's always a market for selling stuff like this, and so it was like, oh, look at that. That's kind of funny. Also was kind of funny. They talked about it in the article that what was it? When somebody found this or whatever, it was a MongoDB
that was just open to the internet.
Yeah, open and unsecured on the internet was a MongoDB sitting out there filled with cards and stuff like that the bad guys are using to store this stuff.
That happens. Davi's probably very upset that happens and working to prevent against that. Knowing Davi.
I didn't think that was funny when I said Mongo. It was like, oh crap, just had Davi on here.
I want to delve into my WTF story of the week. Jack, Jack, are you there? Jack, you paying attention?
Yes. Hey, what?
So, I know you might frequent dating sites. Maybe. Well, Craigslist doesn't have personal ads anymore. Of course, it's a very shady place.
Tinder and Bumble and OkCupid and So anyway, you were saying?
Jack knows about all of them.
Just
now,
farmers.
So a Florida man who's 33.
No,
it's always Florida.
Florida man.
That's all you need to know.
Florida's like the U.S. home of like scams and shady activity like this, right?
An alligator rape.
That too. He posted as a housewife to secretly trick men into letting him perform gay sex acts. Now, what I'm just like floored by in this story, in terms of the social engineering aspect of it and in all this stuff. They ran a website that allegedly featured straight men being tricked into accepting sex acts from gay men. So they thought they were meeting with women. However, the straight men were blindfolded and wore blacked out goggles and appeared to believe they were with a woman. And then they were filmed and later bribed. And I'm like, so hold on. First of all, why are you going to look for this stuff online? All right. Okay, so people do that, right? But why would you go to some place and then agree to be blindfolded in blackout goggles? Like, how desperate does someone need to
you obviously vastly underestimate the amount of desperation people have.
Right?
Desperate. Yeah. You need to be Florida desperate.
I mean, that just hearing about that creeps me out.
This is barely
let alone like walking through the process of being blindfolded with blackout goggles.
With a person you've never met,
right?
That you got on Craigslist, but you're like, yeah, sure, what the hell, let's do it.
Right. Yeah, like I don't need to know what's going on. Like, just blindfold me.
Barely a step above the hole in the rest stop bathroom stall.
Well, what I understand, the clients are thinking they're meeting with women.
Sure.
Not necessarily men, which is maybe what you typically expect at a rest area. I don't know. You're the expert on this.
Yes, you're our new glory hole expert, Patrick.
Well, I was wondering why you
academic research, right?
I was wondering why you started off this discussion by bringing Jack into it. I was wondering where you're going with that.
I have spent a lot of time online having conversations with West African scammers who are pretending to be women, but it was pretty obviously they weren't. It was actually really funny. I got one who, once he discovered I helped run hacker cons, I told him I'd give him all sorts of resources if he promised not to try to hack banks. Actually gave him a bunch of videos to look at. He never followed up, so I assume it's more profitable to prey on old people on OkCupid and Match.com. But, whatever.
I will tell you.
The social engineering of that is a whole interesting thing, and the desperation of people on those dating sites is really pretty depressing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can see it, especially if you're in Florida. I mean, that's just you're already desperate.
That's God's waiting room.
But rolling people in prostitution situations has been, I mean, ancient Romans were getting said, hey man, there's a beautiful woman behind that curtain. Just step back there, and you're gonna all your dreams will come true. And guys are like, yeah, here I have a few drachmas, and it's, I mean,
it's in the Godfather, right?
Yeah,
it's a classic scene.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's been going on since the dawn of time. So.
This is just like
this is the modern incarnation of it. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, this is the old, the guy kicks a door in with the woman and says, and chases you off and keeps your wallet.
Now, in other news, thousands of mega logins have been dumped online. And apparently, this one was interesting to me. Obviously, there's data breaches all the time, every week. They turned the data over to Troy Hunt, who basically pointed to credential stuffing. Right, you use one password on one site, it's valid for another site. When Troy got a hold of the mega breach, which is the second incarnation after Kim.com.
Right.
That's your brother, right?
No, it's not my
Paul.com.
There's a history. He actually he changed his name. I got a lot of email after he changed his name. Like, hey, you're going to change your name. No, not going to do that. Legally changed his name to Kim.com. Is still under prosecution for that, and we covered on Hack Naked News his extradition. Is under question right now, and there's a difference in the law. Jason, help me out. What was the difference in the laws? Right, there was
some technicality, and I can't remember.
There was the copyright infringements, which he, I believe, couldn't be extradited under because the country he was
weren't illegal in New Zealand.
They weren't illegal in New Zealand, only in the U.S. So New Zealand was like, no, we're not going to process extradition based on something that's not illegal here in New Zealand, which I thought was interesting from a legal perspective. I'm not a lawyer, but I thought was interesting. But he's also being charged with fraud, and fraud is something that he could be, Kim.com and others could be extradited for. Right. So he's appealing, but basically they're saying, yes, you can be extradited under the fraud charges. So Kim.com and others are still in hot water under the mega upload. This is mega. And what mega, when Troy Hunt got hold of the mega breach, said 98% of the email addresses had already been in previous breaches. So basically they're taking previous breaches, trying to apply that to other sites. Yep. And having success. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Facebook's not removing fake news, but they're demoting it. Yeah, I don't know. Some can claim free speech, like, hey, you should have free speech. Of course, is free speech really free speech on social media platforms where they get to decide what you say and what you can't? They're not removing what they could deem as fake news. They're just demoting it, which basically takes out 80% of the audience for potential articles. They took flack in this article from journalists that said they allowed, what is the news site?
Holocaust deniers?
No, InfoWars.
InfoWars.
Yeah, they're allowing InfoWars. Jason, did you read the story?
Yeah, I read through it, and I looked at it. And I thought, I thought about the free speech thing. One of the things that I did kind of blink out a little bit with the rationale to have Facebook take this stuff down and police this type of stuff. It's kind of a no-win situation for Facebook because they get into this business, and all of a sudden, here, come to our platform and post stuff, but we're going to decide what you can and can't post. We'll suppress things we don't agree with, and that, I have zero sympathy for InfoWars, but
And
I don't know.
Facebook gets in a
I think they
liability
would-
situation, too, of having to be responsible for researching, evaluating, and assessing content.
They're in a bad situation because
you said it's a no-win.
It is a no-win, and here's why it's a no-win. Because I can take the tobacco aspect of this, right? Like, we have a presence on Facebook for Stogie Geeks. However, Facebook will not let you take out an ad to promote your business if you have anything to do with tobacco. Now, we're not selling tobacco at Stogie Geeks. We're putting on a free show. We're willing to say, if you're not of legal smoking age in your country, state, even county, then you shouldn't be watching this content, right? And we're totally abide by that. Like, you have to be of legal smoking age to view this content. If you're not of legal age of smoking, there's no point in you consuming this content, to be quite
honest. I think that's what they're getting criticized for, is being arbitrary.
Right? So Facebook lets us have a presence, even being a tobacco-related business on Facebook, but tells us you can't take out any advertisements. So therefore, oh yeah, like, we kind of have free speech, but we don't, because we're not treated the same way as a business in a different industry. So you end up hating Facebook, and Facebook tries to appeal to say, well, we're supporting free speech, but the people you're saying you support free speech for, you're limiting their voice. You're not removing it, but you're limiting it. So basically, now you're going to take flack from the anti-tobacco people because you allow us on there. You're going to take flack from the pro-tobacco people because you're limiting what they can do. So basically, you're making everyone hate you.
Yeah.
That's what the conclusion I came to in this story.
Where are the Winklevoss twins when you need them?
From personal experience. Yeah, exactly, right? Anyway.
Where's the money? I mean, that's the Facebook angle, is where's the money?
Yeah.
It's a morally, ethically, and politically corrupt organization, which if things were a little different, we could have gotten Davi to go off on that, because he has a pretty epic rant about criminal negligence for a publicly traded company. But I have they're in a really rough situation, and I have no sympathy for them because of the way they've handled a whole bunch of different political, social, and other things, and the way they gutted the security team, and everybody just sort of rolled over and said, sure.
Well, and the political aspect is interesting, Doug, and I think you and I have talked about this. It ties into my story number 7. The Russians who allegedly hacked the DNC mined Bitcoin to fund their operation. Well, of course they did, right? Like, I don't think it's really news or like how they funded it. Every time this comes up, Doug, I think of the conversation that we had where you said, look, anyone running for political office has some type of public relations strategy that includes social media and essentially influencing someone to vote. Now, it's a totally different thing where another nation state tries to influence the vote. Certainly, but everyone who's running for some type of political office also was trying to influence the vote in their favor, and maybe even hiring firms such as Cambridge Analytics to help their political campaign. There's some validity to that. There is a very fine line between, we talked about the ethics in our interview with Davi. I think there's a very interesting ethical debate in this whole thing too.
And I mean, I have a problem with just having outside money targeting different local elections.
Yeah.
So when somebody in Massachusetts starts pouring money into Georgia, trying to influence the election there for whatever reason,
for whatever their own personal
I have a
is.
personal. I get asked all the time, like, kick in $5 to put this candidate in office in the state of Georgia. And I even if I really wish that the Georgians would vote for that Democratic candidate or whatever, I have a personal problem with it. I'm like, I don't have any business trying to influence people in Georgia on what they should do for dog catcher. If they want the evilest guy, Cruella DeVille, as a dog catcher, they ought to be able to vote for Cruella DeVille as a dog catcher, and not have me sitting up here saying, hey, here's my values. I'm going to pour a whole pile of money into that state trying to hose you. But I mean, it's a mess. But yeah, when it's a foreign nation state, it's definitely a big problem, and I'm not sure exactly what to do with it, because that's a changing sovereignty of the world. We've seen that our world is still defined for most of our legal, governmental, and electoral processes in the basis of, I live between these two rivers and the mountains, and that's my world.
But also, thinking of fake news too, it's really tough to discern what's actually happening. Yeah, in terms of and even with the Russian meddling of the election, So exactly like what happened, how much
What's
of the
what?
influence, like what's what? Like what is just being fed into the news media? What's fake news? Whose political backing is trying to influence what? Like the problem gets like so wrapped up that like what is
And how
really,
do you define it? I mean,
it gets to a point like I don't even want to follow it anymore
if
because I don't know
a Russian
which one.
troll writes a post and I see it because I subscribe to RussianTroll.com because I'm interested in that, and I forward that post to all my friends, like how on earth do you delineate what that is? So I think instead of us worrying so much about that, we really ought to be worrying more about educating people so that they're discerning. They look at things and make, instead of being stupid and just reading things and being the dumb guard and saying,
you have to look at things with a skeptical lens. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
I've looked at social media lately, and some of the things that the people that I follow will post more political things. I will kind of question, like really? Like, in regardless of your political affiliation, I'm like really? Is that true? Like what?
And I mean, if I see a story that says,
sometimes I get shit for that too, but I'm like, no, like they take politics out of it for a second. Like let's analyze where this data came from. Is it just completely fabricated?
No, I know. I mean, I see a story that says Hillary Clinton is selling children's skins on eBay. I go, that doesn't make any sense, and maybe I'm going to see if that might actually be true before I grab an assault rifle and head off to a warehouse in New Jersey to save the poor children who are being skinned.
I saw one where a Trump supporter like wrote in marker on the back of their car and misspelled things. I'm like, okay, so how do you know someone didn't do that purposely, take a picture and basically pose as a Trump supporter?
All sides are doing it.
And both sides are doing that.
Both sides.
Now, when it took the 3 minutes to try and validate that, I couldn't find anything, right? Like you're running through TinEye and all that. Like I couldn't validate it easily, which begs the question, how does Facebook and Twitter and now even LinkedIn validate the news? And how do you trust their validation of the news?
And that's the loss of innocence, the Walter Cronkite era where you say, Walter Cronkite comes on the news every night, I trust him, he tells me the truth. And we've moved into the Alex Jones era where a guy comes on and says gay frogs are falling out of the sky.
There's a great documentary on the 90s that talks about the progression of news, reporting on the facts, to a lot of corporate takeovers of news organizations that basically turn them into entertainment outlets and change the message, change the format. Go ahead, Jack.
I was just going to say, if you go back far enough, and Doug and I are probably the only ones who remember this, but growing up, there was a requirement to be equal and provide equal time for if your local news station, even down in Texas, skewed right or left, you had to give equal time. So if you endorsed one candidate, you had to give spare time. And another thing that's changed, Doug, in our lifetime is that you probably remember Tip O'Neill, the famous quote that all politics is local. And that was true at the time. And now, all politics is global.
Yes.
All politics is global. And maybe not dog catcher, but part of the angle that you get on these across state line solicitations is that if you vote for, I won't say names, but if you vote for the person I'm likely to vote for here in one of the congressional races, that puts them in the U.S. Congress or the U.S. Senate. And that has national implications, which we didn't exploit that angle of things earlier. But it's part of the 24-hour news cycle. It's part of politicization and commercialization of news. It's as I've said many times in the past few years. Luckily, I'm old and I'll be dead before long, and most of the listeners will have to suffer through this for decades longer than I will.
Yeah, I forget who ran the documentary, but they talked about the famous cases in the 90s and kind of how that flipped into the Rodney King beatings and what were some of the big news stories in the 90s? All those big news stories. OJ, thank you, the OJ trial, right? How all that was sensationalized for the first time, that there were cameras in the courtroom. It was being transmitted in real time. It was the first time that happened, and that's when it kind of flipped into this more news as entertainment rather than the news actually being the news.
But this is also getting worse with the loss of local news.
Yeah.
that people don't have local news to pay attention to
They
anymore.
read Facebook for their news.
They do. 'Cause
God help us
if
all.
they don't want to listen to the big national
Right.
MSNBC, Fox, CNN kind of thing, well, then they do go and just kind of read what their cousin's brother's uncle wrote on Facebook as being,
The truth.
And even I feel like the local news isn't telling both sides of the local story.
No, they're not.
No.
Awful. Stories that I'm close to, I'm like...
My daughter was just commenting. She was visiting some relatives in a red state, and she was commenting about what the news was like and what the commercials were like, and how it was so weird because she'd never seen anything like that. 'Cause it was so biased, and it was just like so different from what she sees in Rhode Island. And I was like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I had that same experience 2 weeks in Singapore watching the nightly news and how they covered the United States. It's like, holy cow, that's different.
Yeah, very.
Anyway, speaking of news, that rounds out our news. Hopefully we bring the facts here to Security Weekly without bias. Has always been our goal.
Right, yeah.
In
No
the news
bias
segment, at least with no political
empathy and non-bias. That's what
affiliation, certainly.
No one will be offended.
Just dump guards.
Thank you to everyone for participating in this segment.
I'm getting shot tonight, aren't I?
Dog at securityweekly.com. Thank you for everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Paul Security Weekly. We'll see you next time.